Hello all, Game Methuselah. Well, we're getting down to the final here. We're on the stretch and ready to go. As you guys saw in the last video, this is sort of kind of where we left our Ruby Dragon. I've got the scales all dry brushed white, getting ready so that they can get their red inks. All the shards are painted white so they can also get the red inks, and we're going to be working on that pattern. I actually kind of like the white, but unfortunately it looks more like horn or something else, or even this, and it's not a quartz dragon, it's a ruby dragon, so I'm not going to allow it this way. What you didn't see, when the dragon woke me up in the middle of the night last night and wanted to work some more, I did a couple things to test out. Here is the white with a red ink going on it on the faceted gems. I'm not sure how great you can see it. Eventually at the end we'll have some still figures, but I'm pretty happy with it. It's getting the effect I want. It's starting to look like a little stone. Should look pretty good on the main feature of the dragon. The other thing I did was I put in the teeth. I'm not sure, again, like you can see it. I also put in the eyes. Basically, there was a yellow dot with a little tiny black dot. The eyes were very small on this dragon, which I really, really liked. I tend to think a lot of sculpts have very large eyes. Any sort of creature that would burrow, especially use magic and things like that, would need to protect its eyes from, obviously, damage, from when it fights and things. So smaller eyes, especially like in this case, covered with like armored areas, would, I think, look a lot more realistic than big, wide, old eyes. It looks pretty good. What the plan of attack is today is going to be basically doing three things. I have red ink, relatively dark. I have sort of a light ink. I'm going to be sort of using a combination of these two to do all the scales and gem work. I'm then going to be using brown ink, which I'm going to make into a little pattern and start to brown ink all the areas of the dragon that do not have scales. The idea is we're going to darken the shade down even a little bit more from red and into a brown. I then have earth shade, which is sort of a finishing wash. It's good. I like it. I use it on tons of miniatures. I think you've seen me talk about it before. It's a pretty subtle product, so I don't anticipate that we'll really be seeing a whole lot of use in this, because this figure is not really that subtle. It's pretty bold. So, without any further ado, we will go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and go right for the hard job. This is where the rubber is going to meet the road. I'm going to use the red inks, and we're going to get on to the gem work right off the bat. I need a little bit more. All in all, I've been pretty happy with this figure. I mean, it's been kind of unusual for me because I usually don't get too excited about miniatures. I've painted so many that they just usually do them 4 and 5 and 6 at a time, which I actually would have done here, but I really kind of want to just spend the time focusing on talking about the miniature, thinking about the miniature, and being able to sort of express myself to you as we go so you can sort of understand. I'm going to start at the least important areas first to kind of get the test on it, which is going to be the bottom shards here on the legs. They're going to be the least visible. You go in first, you put the red in amongst the surrounding shard pieces, and I'm thinking that's a little darker than I want, so I'm going to, in this case, stay with a little lighter. And that, I think I'm going to use the lighter for the scales themselves and the darker for doing the shards. So you can see that the scales that were here that I had dry brushed white, and I'm not sure how much you can see, but if you can see them here, they've actually looked pretty good. They've turned light red. So now, as far as painting the shards, the way you do it is very much like the old Games Workshop gem theory. You put the paint at the bottom of the item, in this case ink, and then you just wipe upward. Same before. That means that you have the most color being brought up on the bottom where it starts and at the end where you finish. So it kind of gives you an idea to sweep. Gives you a sweeping color. And the great thing about inks is if it comes out in a way you don't like it, you just keep doing it. You have lots of time. It's going on wet. Can we see it here pretty good? That is what we're looking at. Again, if you can see it right here, that's the effect we've got. Now, there's still pretty much a large amount of contrast here, but it's not so stark as the white. And I really didn't want that anyway. So we get in here and do the other, and then we look at it, and I'm actually pretty happy with this effect. Now again, I could do a lot more elaborate, interesting painting effects that we have talked about, but truthfully, it's not speed paint. And what I wanted to do here, obviously more than anything else, was to be able to give you an opportunity to paint a figure quickly for yourself and get it on the board. Because come this afternoon, when this figure is finished, my guesstimation is I will be one of the few people, if not the only person around, who could actually field this dragon in a role-playing adventure. So it is what it is. A little darker than I wanted. So again, the thing is, if it's too dark, you just go back, take everything off your brush, and come back with one more sweep, and it'll pick the ink up, and then move it to where it is you do want it. So far, I'm kind of liking this effect. It's not anywhere near as nice as some of the big high-end Golden Demon painter types. I guess I shouldn't say that, since I guess that sort of kind of includes me, even though I tell you I'm substantially less talented than most of the ones you'll see nowadays. Again, we got the little gemstones on the back that have broken through on the spine, so we do the same on them. And what's nice about the inks is, and you'll see it on this one, there's multiple facets. Now, if you were to paint this as a Golden Demon type, you would do sort of the same thing, but then you'd go back and paint each facet red. And you might even use a different red on some of the different facets. And the idea on that is you can get some kind of a way the light filters in. But this, I think, is sufficient, again, for speed paint and for the fact that you want this figure used and on the table. And as you play with it and use it, you're gonna bang up figures. I had somebody comment that, you know, he liked the figure and he's going to change some of the way he does, but he says he always feels nervous putting figures on the table that he's put many hours into. And I think of a quote that Matt kind of gave me, and I just sort of changed it around, but it's like, if you have the gift and you don't use it, it's pretty much like not having the gift at all. You know, if you've got the figures and you've got the ability, you know, get them on the board. I mean, Steve Kish painted really wonderful figures, and every time they were on the board, I felt that our experience in the gaming was 100% better than it would have been if we were using M&Ms or whatever. I mean, and then even if they were just crummy figures, a lot of people just take figures and they don't necessarily paint them. Now, here's where I was saying that what I'm doing here is I'm using the lighter red on all what would be the faceted gems here. And that, again, they kind of put a little dot. I'm not sure how good this camera is going to focus on this to give you an idea, and I'm thinking it's not. But, nah, it's not. We're going to lose focal on this. Let's see if I can touch it. Boop. There you go. You can see it kind of focusing in on this, and you can start to see where the red sits up higher on the facets. So when it dries, you're going to have this. Now, you could do multiple times with this to get it the way you want it, and I likely would. You know, again, it's all a matter of how long you have. You know, if you've got till tonight, and tonight's the night of the game, you're not even going to have a chance to do a coating on this. You got to be quick, and that's where speed painting comes in. I mean, you can have people who know your collection of miniatures. Well, maybe not mine, but in the old days when we only had a few hundred figures, people kind of knew what you had. So they said, well, you know, we could be safe. Jim doesn't have any dragons. Yeah, well, quick speed paint, that all changes. Again, the same thing we were talking about here before on all these shards, is just starting on the base and then swiping up the base and leaving a little extra at the top. Start at the base. And what it'll do is it'll fill in underneath and, you know, color all the others. Now, these aren't as red as I would like. Again, if I had painted the dragon brown, which, as I said to you guys, I highly recommend you do, I would suggest you paint the dragon brown so it comes out kind of a brownish tan. And then you can really go crazy with the reds here to make these things look like really beautiful rubies. I'm a little more stuck. Plus, obviously, I need to do something that's quick because I don't have the time. Well, I have the time, but not the time if I'm telling you I'm speed painting, to get an effect that I like. Again, you can see it here. It kind of looks like a pink quartz, which I don't hate. You know, it's, again, not ruby, but I think that sometimes you have to make a little concession to whatever you're doing, especially, again, if I had actually been kind of smart, I might have actually gone back and completely repainted this dragon brown and started with that and let you guys see that happening. But my guess, and as I told you, you're going to see a lot more of, I think, really good painters come out here and give you their renditions. And then you're going to realize, you know, kind of how substandard my piece is. But the other thing that it is it's here. And that, in many ways to me, when you're playing, and again, my feeling is, if you're painting figures, they need to go onto the table and be played. It's better to have them done fast and look good than having, oh God, I'm really having a trouble with this camera getting it on there. Somebody suggested something which I think I'm going to really try to look into and maybe do, because I may like to do a lot more painting videos, and this might be the solution. I guess these motorcyclists, I've seen them, and I'm not sure what the names of them are, the part numbers, but they wear these little cameras on top of their helmets. And somebody said, you should get one of those for your painting. And I thought, because I had asked Matt, and he thought, hey, it was a great idea. I said, why don't you do me a painting table up at your studio, and I can come in there and paint. And then I said, and even more importantly, if you guys hire, you know, pro painters to come in and do some of these figures down the road, especially some of the newer miniatures you want to do, you can make a deal with them to say, look, part of your contractual obligation is you come into the studio and you paint, you know, figures and show people how you do it and things like that. And I always think that's important. When I had my shops, gaming shops, Magic the Gathering was really big, and we had in-store gaming. We were one of the few places in Southern California to have in-store gaming in all our facilities at the time. And after we did it, it was kind of like everybody started to do it. And that's good. I think that really helped the hobby a lot. I like it when people see something that's good and follow suit. You know, it's always nice to have a monopoly on something, but I kind of care more for the hobby than I do for, you know, how much money was going into my coffers. I mean, I had a nice job, career, I was making good money. I was more interested in trying to make the gaming better. But what that I was alluding to, and have totally forgotten, was that if you improve everything and you get it played and you make it look good, you're going to excite people to get involved and play in your game. I have a group, the Pad group, which is Matt Coville's old group, and I've played with them pretty frequently, who really, when I came on board, kind of poo-pooed miniatures to an extent. And they had some dungeon tiles, but most of the time they said, hey, mostly we just use M&Ms and all that, and which I would not have any part of. So I bring all my miniatures, or, you know, I wouldn't bring all of them. I bring a few hundred miniatures every time we play, and then we would have miniatures to utilize in our games. And I thought over the time that made a real big improvement in the gaming. And I think it does. And again, to me, I'd rather have a nice looking figure like this on the board than have painted a Golden Demon style fig where I spent 2 weeks painting the figure, you know, and doing all that, and then never, ever, ever putting it on the board. And so that's what you're going to get from me. Now, I'm talking here, it's not really nervous energy, but a lot of people say they like to hear me yammer. I'm not sure why. Sometimes it's nonsensical, but this is sort of kind of working. It's not 100% to my liking, but it's doing, I think, good enough for what I wanted to do. Now you can see where the reds have come on in both of these wing knuckles here, and you can again see it's kind of more pinkish, but a lot of rubies, especially sort of the lower class ones that you might see in a shop, they get to be very low color. Again, the reds are going into the areas where there's scales, so you can see where I put in scales, they're sort of darkening up now, and a lot of them are getting the little facets on the end, so it looks like gems. Now, the dragon is substantially still more red than I would have liked, but again, I have to really surrender more to what I think the figure would look like than to what I think dramatic contrast would look like. So here's the money shots here. These are the big facial shards. Sorry if I drop out of field. I'm working on such a close-up because I'm trying to keep close enough so I can see it, and then still trying to make it so you guys can see what's going on. That might actually be not a bad way to do it right there. Let's see. Now I might be able to get a little darker on these ones on the face. So because people are going to know, because there's such a large expanse of white, they're going to keep the color nice and bright, and it allows me to lay a little bit more red down. Can you see him? Yep. I really think I'm going to look into that head camera. I think that would be the way for me, because as I said, you know, getting Matt, if he sets up a studio for me, and or other painters, of course, who would come in and paint stuff and show you how to do it, which I think would be really excellent. I think you guys would do really well to be able to watch lots of really talented painters. When I worked at the military shop back in the day, there were really fabulous painters, and back then they were a dime a dozen, nobody cared, and mostly they painted historicals. But I learned a whole lot about them because they would come in and get commissioned to paint figures, and they were being paid virtually nothing. But they would bring these pieces in to go on display, and Steve Wolf would negotiate the pricing with them and all that. And I would look at these pieces, and some of these guys' styles were just tremendous. So, of course, being a budding painter, I would ask questions, and they would show me their techniques. Usually super excited to find out that actually somebody cared. And that's how I kind of got into really doing miniature painting as opposed to historical painting, which I had done like in the IPMS days and when I was doing, which is still today, but I just don't really do that many historicals. Right now, my feeling is if I can paint it, it's got to go on the table and get dice rolled near it, and be part of the game. I don't know how much you're seeing this. I hope you are. I'm trying to keep checking to see that I'm staying close enough to the effect. I think this is going to work. I'm not going to want to hit this figure with a hammer. Not that I've ever done that. Though that does bring up a story that years ago, when I had my Palin Liam of Keys. Oh my God, I totally walked out of frame. Sorry, guys. I might delete some of this, well, because you won't be able to hear me boring you to death with the conversation. I painted a really beautiful figure from my palette, and I was so proud of it. It was really, really good. And my friend Don and my buddies, Don's a good painter, really good painter. I would say actually better than me, though. Don't tell him that. He made a figure that looked very, very similar to mine. I went out and found the figure I used, and he painted it in the same color scheme, kind of sped painted, didn't really make it look anywhere near as good as the one I did. And then they had this little trick they planned. So we had an adventure. We're going down the adventure, and he says, "Oh, Liam springs the trap." And I went, "Oh, okay." So what they had done is they say, "Hey, Jim, is this your die?" And they point over. I looked around, and they, look at some die, which of course was not my die. And they switched figures. And when I turned around, Kevin picked up a hammer and smashed the figure. I was like, what? He goes, the stone trap falls and crushes your character. And I was like, but that's my miniature. Well, they thought this was a hilarious joke. And in retrospect, of course, it was. But at the time, I was thinking, these guys don't know how many guns I own. I'm not happy here. But again, I think this is a lot like me throwing Ed Kettler's D20 out the window. I mean, I don't think he's ever to this day forgiven me because he had a out of balance. Darn it, this is not staying in focal. I blame the dragon. Of course, it doesn't want you to see it. This is all its secrets. It doesn't want you to know or something. I don't know. But there we go. Now, I'm going to stop for a minute, and I'm going to go look it over and see how I got it. And then when I come back, we'll go ahead and do the brown washes. But I think that's going to look pretty good when I'm done. The only thinking I'm thinking is I really do want to keep the color a little lighter. I was thinking that dark looked pretty good, but as I look at it, it just tends to blend a little bit too much into the body, which is obviously why the artists who did the sketch work said brown. But I did the Proletariat Dragon here, the red Comrade Dragon. I think it's dry enough for us to keep playing. It's strange here, stepping over to look at the camera. It looks like a lot of this seems a lot more purple on the camera than it does looking at the figure in real life. I'm not quite sure why that is. I'm sure there'll be some people out there who are really experts, and they're going to go ahead and tell me, which is why I love making these statements, because I think this community is fabulous at getting you new information. I mean, every day I learn something new that I really find super valuable, and a lot of it on the technical end. I mean, I am completely ignorant in the technical end, as I think you guys have already known. And I'm sort of having to stumble around in my own because I don't have any techs around me on a regular basis to talk to. I think when Matt gets up and going, he's kind of telling me I think I might get some access to his folks and maybe they can help me make vids and things. And if nothing else, I can learn this until he has to throw me out into the street. So we're going to go now and go ahead and do the brown. I kind of like the way the shards and the gems came out. They don't seem to look quite as good. Again, like I said, they're looking more purple, but I'm not finding that to be the case. Now, this dragon is much more monochromatic than I would normally like. But, you know, considering, like I said, how I kind of sort of botched the start by painting it red, I think I've made a reasonable comeback. So you'll see a lot more of these figures, like I said, in the future, and hopefully by people who are way better than me. And I think you'll get a chance to appreciate that. So what I've got going on now here is my brown wash. This is it here. It's P3. P3 makes some pretty decent paint. Not necessarily my favorite, but they're usually a little bit more reasonable than some of the others. And they do a reasonably good job. And I find most of the inks that everybody uses, you know, are fine. Now, I like Vallejo. I like a lot of the expensive paints that I've talked about. But often in these things, I like to paint with the cheap stuff because I want to keep showing people who maybe don't have the economy that you can still get a lot of beautiful effects and not having to spend a ton of money. Now, in all fairness, I'm not sure anybody who has this dragon is so poor that they can't go out and spend money to buy really nice paint, but still, you get the point. Now what we're doing here is going back and putting a secondary brown wash on the dragon. Brown ink wash. I find washes are really good because what they do is they tone down the dry brush and they sort of blend all the figures together. Now, if you're using smaller figures or right at the end, there's that other product which I've talked to you about called the Earthshade that GW makes. I find that to be really excellent. Guys over at the Guild House, one of the painters there calls it skill in a bottle. I don't actually think that's an unreasonable statement. I find that you can get a lot of really nice finishing effects by using it. I don't know whether I'll actually use it here. I mean, I may not need to. I don't know if you can just see this. I just started to do a brown into the tail here, and more of the skin detail comes up, and that makes me pleased. The guys who sculpted this, the figure seems very subtle to begin with, and I think a lot of people who initially saw it might not have been overly impressed. But the more I get into painting it, I really do appreciate the fact that whoever was the sculptor on this really put some thought into this figure. And I don't know whether the artist conception was done first and he worked off of that, or, you know, vice versa. But truthfully, I'm really kind of pleased with this. And where I thought the pose initially was kind of static, I really, really like it. My buddy Steve used to always say he always liked painting figures that looked like they were what he called port arms, that they were all ready to fight, but they weren't in the middle of a fighting pose. He always thought the ones in fighting poses looked a little ridiculous because obviously they're standing there all the time, and most of the time they're talking to barkeeps or peasants, and it looks dumb when your character looks like it's lunging or doing something like that. Now, I don't always agree. I mean, I think, but if you start to see my miniature collection and a lot of Steve's stuff, you'll see that a lot of our figures are not in action poses. They're in sort of workaday poses. And I still like it. I guess that's me. And again, it was like somebody who asked me if I like metal or plastic miniatures more and why. And I said, well, I like metal miniatures most. But honestly, I think that's just because that's what I've used most of my life. And once you get used to something, it's why, like I said, I don't airbrush paint. I mean, I have airbrushes. In fact, I have two, got compressor and all that. And I airbrush tank models and stuff like that. And I've shaded them with airbrushes. I've done very much like what the pro miniature painters do, and I've watched a bunch of the videos. I've even been judges with these professional instructors in miniatures and using airbrushes, and they always want to, oh, we'll teach you how to do it. And I said, I'm pretty sure I know how to do it. It's like Quigley Down Under. I just said I didn't have any use for it. Didn't say I didn't know how to use it. So it's up to you. I mean, I think the secret is, and like I tell people, it's really at the end of the day, what you're happiest with. Now, I'm getting in here with the eye. I don't know how much you can see this. Let me see if I can get the camera to give me a little more focal on that. More like a knot. These eyes are small. So what I did is I put yellow, and I use yellow because sometimes I like something that kind of looks a little more reptilian or alien on a dragon. And then, you know, we go in there. You can see I did the teeth. I did them in light gray, and then I gave them a black wash, so they would look sort of the blackish teeth, and you can kind of see them. But again, since they aren't a main focal point of the miniature, you don't have to worry about it too much. Again, you can see I'm just getting in here with all the brown ink. Or maybe you can't. I'll put it back down a little bit more. I try not to miss a spot. That's why, like I said, when I paint, I rotate a lot. So especially since I'm speed painting, you just don't want to go through all the trouble of getting things on and then going, oops, I missed a spot. Then you have to go back and kind of reinvent the wheel. The more I do this, the more I really am pleased with this dragon. The brown washes are settling down the red for me sufficiently that I'm happy with it. The dragon's going to look very red. There's nothing I can do about it, and other than, like I said, completely redo it. But it's going to look like a nice rendition of a dragon as described as being a ruby gem dragon.